was his appearance as Hawk that sort of brought him to the attention of the people casting. He was a very powerful and enigmatic character in the Spencer for Hire movies that brought him to the attention of the people casting.
Avery Brooks in Spencer looked so huge. And he had such a deep voice.
I think that's why they reached out and thought, well, maybe this guy could make an interesting captain. He'd be slightly different from Kirk and Picard.
Avery Brooks blew us away. It was remarkable.
The only problem? Avery's signature bald head and goatee had to go.
They wanted him not to be Hawk, a character he was very identified with, and so he was asked to grow his hair out and shave his goatee.
He said clearly and without any sense of quietude or gentility, I'm more comfortable looking the way I like to look and being who I am.
But in the end, Avery relented. Deep Space Nine had its new captain, and he would be unlike any other Starfleet commander who'd come before.
Right along with the fact that Deep Space Nine was going to be darker and grittier, Benjamin Sisko had flaws and dark shadows that we saw in the pilot.
The first time we see Avery Brooks as Sisko in Deep Space Nine is in the pilot, in Emissary, and it's the Battle of Wolf 359, this climactic fight where the Borg cube is charging toward Earth and it's smashing apart a fleet of 39 Starfleet ships.
The same battle that Picard was in Next Generation, which was a brilliant stroke.
Sisko, his ship is on fire. The Saratoga is going up in flames. His crew is dead. Everyone's trying to bail out before the ship blows up. And he's able to rescue his son, and he hands his son off to one of his crewmen, but he can't save his wife. His wife is already dead. He'd rather die than leave her behind.
He was just so grief-stricken, and he just wailed this cry that just went right through you. And I remember turning to a co-worker on set. We both had tears in our eyes, and I remember thinking, this is going to be a wild ride.
I thought this is probably the most emotionally raw character I've ever seen on Star Trek.
Got to go now, sir. Damn it, we just can't leave her here.
Star Trek fans met a new kind of captain, embittered and unsparing. The first man to feel his wrath is the officer who gave him his commission as commander aboard Deep Space Nine, Jean-Luc Picard.
He didn't see a fellow Starfleet captain. He saw Locutus. He saw the man who destroyed his ship, who killed 10,000 Starfleet officers. He saw the man who killed his wife.
Picard cannot defend himself because it's a burden he still carries with him.
Sisko, of all the Starfleet captains we've seen as series leads, was more willing to hold a grudge.
Welcome to Bajor. It's been a long time, Captain. We met before. Yes, sir. We met in battle. I was on the Saratoga at Wolf 359.
You're thinking, is he gonna clock this guy right in the face? Is he gonna kill him right here and now?
It's a startling moment because we haven't seen this sort of conflict among two Star Trek heroes before.
Avery Brooks, as Sisko, was able to really convey this sense that people, even in the 24th century, this perfect world, people were still not perfect.
The new commander showed restraint, this time. But in 173 episodes of Deep Space Nine, Sisko let his fist do the talking 16 times, or about twice a season. In 178 episodes of Next Generation, Picard raised his voice more than his fists. He resorted to hand-to-hand combat just 10 times. But even Sisko couldn't go toe-to-toe with Kirk. In 79 episodes, James T. rolled up his sleeves 83 times. But it isn't just anger that sets Sisko apart from his Starfleet peers.
First of all, he's a father. You know, he's a widower. He's lost more, in a very real sense, when we meet him than any of his predecessors.
Show Bible for Deep Space Nine describes Sisko as a family man. And this father-son relationship was at the core of almost everything Sisko did.
Sisko and Avery had this dynamic of of being this lion who was capable of being very tender, very sweet.
You hear me? I'm not going to lose you.
As an outpost in the Gamma Quadrant, DS9 is visited by many species, meaning the bar on the promenade is one of the galaxy's most awesome pickup joints. But as a single father commanding an alien space station for the Federation, Sisko was in no position to play the field.
He's really, for a long time, not open to any sort of romantic relationships at all, as people who lose spouses often are. Ultimately, that changes when he meets the right person.
What kind of reading does Captain Sisko get on our tricorder of romance? He chalks up 2 in the marriage column. And as for kiss and tell, 0. Unless you count the alternate universe where he hooks up with 2 different women in the same episode. Coming up, Star Trek's most hard-nosed captain gets an action hero makeover.
With a shaved head and a goatee, you know the bad in the building.
Deep Space Nine arrived in 1993 as a different breed of Star Trek series. Set in an alien outpost, it was far grittier than its predecessors. And that required a grittier kind of captain. They found the perfect Sisko in actor Avery Brooks. But 3 seasons into the series' run, Brooks decided to put his own stamp on the role in an unusual way.
Sisko walks out of his office with a shaved head and a goatee. You know the bad in the building.
Captain Sisko was a clean-shaven man with a full head of hair. Avery Brooks, on the other hand, was a man with a goat and a bald head. And it took us 3 freaking years to get the powers that be to let us shave his head and let him grow his goat.
It wasn't just a change in hairstyle. The new look marked a transformation in character, from a widower in mourning to a Starfleet street fighter.
He had gone through a transformation, and the key to that transformation, I think, was that he finally got his own ship. He got the Defiant. And this is no shiny, happy ship of exploration with a hotel lounge for a bridge. This is a tight, mean, fast, overpowered battleship. This guy got himself one sweet ride. This was Sisko as he was meant to be. Captain's pips and a bad ship.
And that new attitude would come in handy. As fears of domestic terrorism swept the nation in the mid-90s, Deep Space Nine and its bare-knuckle captain faced their own insurgent threat.
There was one episode where he was going after Eddington, who was the security chief on Deep Space Nine, who was working for a terrorist group called the Maquis.
And the new Captain Sisko wasn't about to tolerate betrayal in his ranks.
Eddington betrayed him and betrayed his trust. And there's a planet on which the Maquis were using as a headquarters. And Sisko threatened to bombard it with particles that would basically make the planet uninhabitable.
He's willing to become the villain if that's what it takes to defeat Eddington.
You expect me to believe that a decorated Starfleet officer, the pride of the service, is going to poison an entire planet?
That's exactly what I'm going to do.
You're bluffing.
Am I? Commander, launch torpedoes. Commander, I said launch torpedoes.
Sisko never explained his orders. He gave it, and you followed it. If you questioned it, he simply gave it to you again. Picard would discuss his orders ad infinitum, ad nauseum. Picard wouldn't shut up. Kirk gave orders, you followed them. Sisko gives orders, you follow them.
I know that military people that I have spoken to over the years felt that in a way he was the most believable of all the captains.
Captains to captains, I think the two who are most similar are Sisko and Kirk. They're both men of action. They're very bold. What's different about them is that in a lot of ways, Sisko is more capable of morally questionable choice. Kirk, even when he wanted to cross the line, he wouldn't. He'd walk right up to the line. He would smudge the line, but he wouldn't really go across it. Sisko would get to the line, step over it, take 5 more steps, and say, line? What line?
But even more uncharted territory lay ahead for the sci-fi franchise. Star Trek was about to surge forward by going back to the future. Paramount Studios planned to launch its United Paramount Network, or UPN, in January of 1995. And as their flagship series, they envisioned a whole new Star Trek. The Next Generation was nearing the end of its voyage after a successful 7-year run. Deep Space Nine was performing well. The new franchise had to be familiar, but fresh.
The idea was, let us find a way to take a Federation starship and fling it to the other side of the galaxy where it is in no contact with Starfleet. It's so far away, there is no logical way that it could get back.
Swept into uncharted territory by an advanced but ancient technology, the USS Voyager's mission was simple: get home. But creator Rick Berman decided to add another huge twist.
We decided, obviously, that after 3 males as captains, it would be great to have a female as captain.
Roddenberry's vision of the 24th century was a time without color barriers or glass ceilings. But network executives and TV viewers were still living in the 20th century. Would they go for a woman captain?
UPN, the new network, everybody was on board with having it be a woman, as long as everything worked out. The trouble is, everything almost didn't work out.
One of my favorite I told you so experiences happened in the midst of all this. One of the actresses that came in to read for the role was Geneviève Bujold. I was a huge fan of hers.
She agrees to do it. They're ecstatic. The studio, the network are thrilled. We've got an Academy Award winner going to play our captain. This'll put us on the map.
But Rick Berman was hesitant.
I smelled trouble because as sweet and talented as Geneviève was, she did not strike me as somebody who could put up with the rigors of doing a television series. You're working sometimes 15, 16 hours a day.
Despite Rick's warnings, Bujold arrived on set. But soon after shooting commenced, it became clear. TV was far tougher than she'd expected.
Geneviève Bujold, much more of a method actress. And that's great if you have a lot of time to work with the director, you have a lot of time to work with the script, you have a lot of time to work with a shoot, and you're only shooting a couple pages a day. If you are shooting television, it is virtually impossible.
It literally took less than 24 hours for her to come to grips with the fact that this was not for her. I was as sad as everyone else, but there was this kind of nasty sense of satisfaction that I had that this was something that I had always felt was going to be the case.
Now they're like apoplectic. We've got to find something. They were ready to go back to man. They were ready to cast the first officer and doctor as women if they had to have a male captain.
What's going to happen to the show now? Are we going to go in limbo? It's going to take forever to recast? There was this tremendous feeling of unrest.
Voyager the series was set to launch in January of 1995. But just 4 months out, Voyager the ship was rudderless without her captain. In 1995, the UPN TV network was set to launch a whole new Star Trek franchise. Voyager would follow the exploits of a Starfleet vessel trying to return home from the distant reaches of the galaxy. And for the first time, there wouldn't be a man at the helm. As its groundbreaking first female captain as a series lead, Star Trek Voyager cast an Oscar nominee. But when she quit, the search for a replacement was kicked into warp drive.
The fax machine went nonstop for days and days on end. Please cast a woman, please cast a woman. Don't you dare backtrack and not cast a woman.
Fortunately, one actress did have the right stuff for Starfleet.
I was sitting in a movie with my best friend, Nancy Edison. She said, I'm reading something that the female captain of the new Star Trek series has just fallen out. She turned to me and she said, you would be perfect.
I remember seeing Kate on Ryan's Hope. She played Mary Ryan, and also Mrs. Columbo. And on Roots the Gift, she played a slave catcher, which is certainly an interesting choice in terms of putting a woman as a slave catcher, and she played it very, very tough.
But first, she had to pass muster with the network. To land the game-changing role, Kate joined a handful of hopefuls, such as Christina Pickles, Chelsea Field, and Erin Gray, at auditions in Los Angeles.
I think I even said to the group, there must have been 30 people in that room, this is really right for me. So why don't we just get going?
They really wanted the first female Star Trek captain to be, and Kate has that in spades.
Mulgrew was cast on a Friday and arrived on set the following Monday to begin her first 19-hour day.
I arrived at about 4:30 in the morning, and the attention to detail. I had my bosom, put here and there and strapped and released and ripped. I was shoved into that spandex thing. I was given 4-inch boots, everything to sort of equalize me in terms of the men.
We had a hair reshoot for Kate on Voyager in the pilot that I think cost $200,000 because they decided to change her hairdo.
I was stopped every 2 minutes to fix the hair, to fix the lips, to fix the breast, to fix the thing, to fix and fix and fix and fix and fix and fix and fix. And now action. With so many dollars in jeopardy, it was a big deal. And I knew that we were changing television history. And so did they. And were I to fail, it would be a setback for women.
But Kate kept a stiff upper lip and quickly laid claim to one of the most famous seats in television.
The first time I walked out onto the bridge was nerve-wracking. The director said to me, "You must understand that it is your living room. It belongs to you and no one else. And just take possession." And so I did.
She shuffles off 3 or 4 orders real quick, she blasts them, sits down in the chair and says, "Engage." And I thought, okay, we got our captain.
I would say in battle, she's absolutely fearless. She adheres to protocol, but when necessary, she's a gunslinger.
Captain Janeway kept her cool. Absolute grace under pressure. You kind of never doubted that whatever she said she was going to do, she'd do, no matter how bad things got.
And things were about to get very bad indeed. In the first episode, Janeway's leadership skills would be put to the test in the ultimate deep space dilemma. To survive, she'd have to combine Kirk's cowboy diplomacy with Picard's cunning.
Voyager is a brand new ship on its maiden voyage. It's not a 3-hour tour like the Minnow and Gilligan's Island, but it's the equivalent. They're going out for a short run. And of course, they're swept to the other side of the universe.
It is in the Delta Quadrant, 70,000 light years from home, where Janeway faces a choice that will change the lives of her crew and set the course for the entire series.
She makes the decision to destroy the only means of getting home, the way that they were brought there, in order to prevent the bad guys from wreaking havoc.
The prime directive is, don't get involved. Leave them alone. Unless something terrible is going on. Then you go in and you try to fix it. Janeway is forced with an incredible dilemma. She knows what the right thing to do is morally and ethically, but that course of action is going to cost her and her crew dearly.
As a captain, you have to make those choices that only the captain could make.
We'll have to find another way home. What other way home is there? Who is she to be making these decisions for all of us?
She's the captain.
She was in probably one of the most extreme situations of any Starfleet captain. Kirk and Picard are very close to home when they're on their various missions. If something goes really bad, another ship can come out and help them. Voyager is on their own. There's no backup. There's no help coming.
In a moment of perilous decision, there has to be a recklessness to it. There has to be a fearlessness to it. Logic will not provide you with the answer. So when push came to shove, she pulled her guns out. And she just went firing into the abyss. And 9 times out of 10, it saved the day.
Fire.
Once you had to throw all reason out the window, she was the one with the samurai sword. Come on, come on. And that's what I think defined Catherine Janeway. Get your phasers, get your stun rifles, let's go. I mean, I was the first one always to want to jump on the shuttlecraft.
Is Kate right? Was Janeway first to lead a mission off the ship? In 7 seasons, Janeway led the away team 44 times, nearly tying Sisko's 45. Picard ranks third with 35, but no one touches our courageous Kirk, who in only 3 seasons led the expedition in nearly half of his 79 episodes. The writers had no trouble making Janeway tough, but showing a Starfleet commander's tender side? That wasn't as easy.
What does a woman do in the captain's seat? Does she take a lover? Does she have a husband? Does she have a child? How is this woman going to lead this ship?
Voyager itself is cut off from everything they know. So now if your captain is going to personify and reflect what your show tone is about, Janeway, I guess, could be the loneliest of all the captains. She has a little bit of a romantic chemistry with Chakotay, the first officer, that the writers back away from because captains can't date their crew.
This loneliness of command is what gives the others hope that they will survive.
Occasionally, there'd be an alien flirtation. One time, she even, despite herself, got sucked into a holodeck romance. She was kind of a Jane Eyre kind of a character.
And there you got to see Janeway fooling Janeway.
Oh, I think I've waited long enough.
So I think just that holographic boyfriend. And once I had lizards with Lieutenant Paris and the turbo lift. Very unattractive. We copulated and I had lizards. Really unattractive. Next question.
Just how lonely was Janeway compared with her Starfleet peers? In her long odyssey, she smooched only 4 hunky humans, plus 1 alien. If you count hologram hookups, the number climbs to 7, just about tying Picard with an average of 1 love affair per season. Out of respect for his betrothed, we'll take Sisko out of the mix. As for the Mac Daddy of deep space, Captain Kirk locked lips with 21 interstellar companions. Poor Janeway.
The audience should have left the 7 years with Janeway thinking, loneliness is very real.
One of the boys, but all woman, Janeway redefined the role of Starfleet captain with split-second decisions, a gunslinger's attitude, and grim determination to get her ship home in one piece.
To play the first female captain was, and history will bear me out, absolutely remarkable.
Voyager may have broken new ground with its first female captain as a series lead, but the next journey would be even riskier. Star Trek was going back to its roots, and tinkering with the sacred text would prove more perilous than a Klingon warbird. One misstep, and die-hard fans would set their phasers to kill. Voyager broke new ground, putting the first female captain at the helm of a starship as a series lead. But Paramount Studios wasn't done yet. In 2000, they tapped Star Trek stalwart Rick Berman, this time pairing him up with Next Gen and Voyager producer Brannon Braga to boldly go in a whole new Star Trek direction. But after 5 series and 9 movies, what was left to tell? Plenty, as it turned out.
There's 200 years between our time and what we see of Kirk's era.
Star Trek had already started to feel like magic. I mean, the technology with the holodeck and the transporter started to feel like almost too advanced. And so to go forward from that, where do you go?
How do we get from our time through the NASA vibe to where James T. Kirk is flying his starship? Enterprise fills that gap. Who was the first Earth captain to really boldly go?
It was a fresh prequel concept to basically show what it was like for humans to venture out into space for the first time.
which meant this captain would indeed be a pioneer exploring deep space for the very first time in human history.
Kirk, Picard, all those guys, the rule books had been made. What about the days when they didn't have all the answers, when technology didn't save their ass every week? How do we know who's a stranger, who's an enemy, who's a friend? Who learned all that? That wound up being Jonathan Archer's province. That wound up being Jonathan Archer's piece of history.
Jonathan Archer would get a crash course in the perils of the universe as no other Star Trek captain had.
Archer was someone who was conceived to be more, not so much the dashing Buck Rogers type commander. He was kind of like as if a Star Trek fan had taken command of the vessel. Someone who was interested in the science and what lies out there, and who was frankly a little nerdy. He was cool in his kind of nerdiness.
On paper, Captain Archer was intriguing to say the least. But finding the actor who could play geeky and cool, that was a tall order. Fortunately, Paramount executives knew the right man for the job.
Kerry McCluggage, chairman of Paramount Television at the time, sort of the force behind us creating a new series. He knew Scott.
Everybody loved Scott Bakula, remembered him from Quantum Leap. Sam Beckett, his character, this kind of, you know, the energetic young guy throwing himself into these situations.
He got to play everything from a little old lady to an old black woman. You never knew what it was until he looked in the mirror.
You could see that this was a versatile actor who didn't mind, having a lot of fun and sometimes at his own expense.
The combination of projecting intelligence, but at the same time the ability to do humor is tremendously important, especially having seen Shatner playing Kirk. Scott really had that.
But Bakula was a hot commodity, and the USS Enterprise would have to go to battle stations to win him.
I had my own series at the time called Odyssey 5 at Showtime, and I was trying to get Scott Bakula. And we wanted him for that part, which ultimately was played by Peter Weller, but we lost him to Enterprise.
Scott Bakula was the highest profile actor to come into a Star Trek captaincy, if you look at all 5 of them. People were thrilled. Hollywood was thrilled.
But when filming began on May 14, 2001, producers were worried. After all, any disturbance in the Star Trek universe can backfire in a big way.
One of the big challenges of doing the prequel is continuity, and Star Trek is a universe that's pretty self-contained and has specific rules of things that have been established, and the biggest critics are the fans.
We were a little nervous. I mean, I remember taking that first step on the bridge to shoot. I actually was the first shot of the show. And I remember taking a little breath before they said action and went, well, here we go.
From its first season, the creators of Enterprise had tinkered with what makes a Star Trek captain tick. Unlike the savvy Picard or jaded Kirk, Archer was a wide-eyed pioneer, seeing the universe for the first time and vastly underestimating its capacity for evil.
Archer is just as naive as humanity is. They're all gung-ho to get out there. It's really NASA right stuff attitude.
They wanted a guy that had those Boy Scout qualities. He was wide-eyed about researching everything that they could with this new warp engine, which his father helped develop.
Senior staff, please report to the bridge.
I've checked the Vulcan database, sir. No previous sightings.
That means we discovered it.
Archer's Comet. Take us closer, Ensign.
Aye, sir.
What Archer finds out very quickly, well, as they say, space is not always a friendly place.
As the first captain to lead the Enterprise, Jonathan Archer broke new ground all over the galaxy. Over the 98-episode run of Enterprise, Jonathan Archer made first contact with an estimated 26 new species. That's an average of 1 new life form every 4 episodes. Janeway edges him out slightly with a new alien encounter every 3.5 episodes. But no one can touch Kirk, who made first contact virtually every other episode.
Archer is the lean, mean flying machine. He's got no time for women in his life. especially after he takes on the mantle of history.
With great power comes great responsibility. I didn't make that up. That's from Spider-Man. And as a Starfleet captain, there is no greater responsibility in his life, in his world. So whatever woman that would have been in his life, you would have been second, and no woman deserves that.
Well, I think one of the problems with Archer as far as romance was that it was the fact that he was a little bit of a Boy Scout, and Boy Scouts don't get the chicks.
Picard didn't have many female love interests, and then you have a captain like Kirk who can have a love interest every week, if not every other.
But on the other hand, how lonely could Archer be? He had the good sense to bring his dog with him.
For the first 2 seasons, Archer was a true innocent. But by season 3, his belief in the basic goodness of the universe is tested when current events begin to color the scripts.
We had just been attacked on 9/11. Season 3 opened with basically an attack on Earth by the Xindi, and Archer was tasked with his ship to go into this enemy territory and prevent the Earth from being destroyed.
Seeing his home planet devastated by alien assault, Archer's optimism is badly shaken. And in another striking parallel to events on the real Earth, the captain does the unthinkable.
If Enterprise fails, Earth could be destroyed. So Archer, at that point, does something which I don't think any commander has ever done. And that is he basically puts the alien in an airlock and extracts the information from him by force. There's a lot of debate over whether we could go this far.
You don't have Starfleet captains torturing people. And I know you would never have seen Captain Picard, maybe Commander Sisko, but I doubt it.
But Archer felt that preserving life and preserving humanity was his primary duty and more important, so he went this extra step.
That ultimate step that hitherto he'd not taken, and it might take a life.
You saw Archer evolve from someone who looked at the cosmos as kind of a place to discover new things to kind of having the scales fall from his eyes a bit.
They made him, a fairly tough man that was not to be, taken lightly.
You better start talking now, because in about 40 seconds, you won't be able to.
I think some people at the time felt that it was too far and that we were destroying the value of Star Trek, and others felt, no, this was an interesting new place to go.
Risk, as Captain Kirk once put it, is part of the job. And many fans embraced Archer's new bare-knuckle attitude. But in the end, it wasn't enough to save the series from its real enemy. By the 4th season, declining ratings accomplished what the Xindi could not: the destruction of Enterprise. But not before Archer, no longer the Boy Scout, saves the universe one last time. In the penultimate 2-part episode called Terra Prime, Archer implores Starfleet to rescue the charter that would ultimately lead to the Federation of Planets.
There's a faction of humanity that wants to kick aliens off the planet, basically, that aliens have no place on Earth. Archer has to explain to the Starfleet Command and Council what this means for humanity. And that is that in every species they find, there is an element of humanity, which makes us all one.
Scott delivered the speech beautifully. And the message inherent that it carried was pure Trek.
The more I've experienced, the more I've learned that no matter how far we travel or how fast we get there, the most profound discoveries are not necessarily beyond that next star. They're within us.
I remember there was a quiet hush on the set, and I think the speech affected everyone.
Jonathan Archer had been tested by war, by terrible decisions, and had emerged a stronger, more confident captain.
For those who believed Enterprise was dry docked before its time, here's an insider's look at what would have happened.
Every Star Trek fan knew this show was going to take us into the Romulan War.
And that's where it would have been heading, and definitely our conversations with Manny, that's where it was going.
Yeah, And what a story that would have been.
Still an untold story. You never know with Star Trek when and where it will reappear.
Up next, Captain Kirk gets a reboot.
The new Kirk is an interesting take on the character. In a word, he's a punk, but he's a punk with potential.
In early 2006, all was quiet on the final frontier. Enterprise had ended its 4-year run the year before, and for the first time in a quarter century, there wasn't a new Star Trek series on the air or a movie in the works. Until Paramount Studios approached producer J.J. Abrams, the man behind the groundbreaking series Lost and the innovative film Cloverfield, to do something truly bold: reinvent and recast Roddenberry's original franchise.
It's only been a year after Enterprise was down. People thought, oh, that's the end of the franchise. It'll be 5, 10, 20 years before we see new Star Trek. Abrams jumped in, his team, Bob Orci, Alex Kurtzman.
If anyone could remake Captain Kirk, it was the writing team of Orci and Kurtzman. They'd already breathed new life into iconic heroes like Hercules and Xena for television. And when Paramount came calling, they just wrapped work on Mission Impossible 3. But tampering with the original Star Trek? Not everyone thought Abrams was up to the task.
Initially, I did have concern that J.J. was going to make a Star Trek that wasn't necessarily up to my expectations, didn't represent the Roddenberry name in the way that I think it should.
Remarkably, before he passed away in 1991, the elder Roddenberry predicted this day would come, and even welcomed it.
My father wanted someone one day to take the next steps with Star Trek, to create characters that perhaps were the young versions of Kirk and Spock, and sort of reimagine what Star Trek is. And it was very prophetic, because that's pretty much exactly what happened with JJ.
As someone who is not a huge Trek fan to begin with, I've become one. And it's mostly because I've discovered a little bit late, there are fans pre-existed me for quite a while, but I've discovered how brilliant what Gene Roddenberry created really is.
Meeting Roddenberry's high standards would be its own kind of Mission Impossible. For starters, what present-day actors could don the legendary Starfleet uniform of William Shatner? When he assumed the role in 1966, Shatner was in his mid-30s. But for his new Kirk, Abrams wanted someone considerably younger.
How are they going to fill William Shatner's shoes?
Rumors swirled around the internet. Matt Damon was the favored choice. But at 36, he was too old by more than a decade. Joshua Jackson, who would later become the star of Abrams' TV series Fringe, auditioned, but he didn't get the job. It would take an actor with little big-screen baggage to reinvent Captain Kirk, and that's exactly what Abrams and company planned to find. In the end, the most coveted role in all of sci-fi went to a relative newcomer, Chris Pine, who had been in Princess Diaries 2 and Smoking Aces.
J.J. Abrams, Roberto Orci, Alex Kurtzman hit up on this genius idea. A little bit of cover your ass, but also it's exciting too. You got the core of these personalities. You've got James T. Kirk that we know. What if just a few things in his life were different? What if his dad wasn't there as a shining example? What if he had a rough childhood? Would Kirk turn out any different?
Kirk was the character who, when they went with the alternate timeline, he's the one who's the most changed, really.
On May 8, 2009, fans got their first glimpse of the new Kirk, and from the start, it was clear he wasn't going to be Shatner light.
Pine's Kirk is much more of a crazed daredevil type than Shatner's Kirk ever was.
The new Kirk is a lot like Sisko in that they're both emotionally raw. They're both pretty quick to throw a punch, and neither one is somebody you want to mess with. The new Kirk is an interesting take on the character. In a word, he's a punk, but he's a punk with potential.
This Kirk has had a hell of a lot rougher life getting to where he's going, and is totally unproven, and it takes this movie's Christopher Pike to look inside that goodness that we all know is in any James T. Kirk and pull it out of him, against his will almost.
So what is it? You like being the only genius-level repeat offender in the Midwest?
Maybe I love it.
Look, So your dad dies, you can settle for a less than ordinary life. Or do you feel like you were meant for something better? Something special?
Pike, more than anything, saw Kirk's ability to think outside the box. You know, quite far outside.
Had Abrams turned Kirk into a rebel without a cause? Well, not for long. The very next day, Jim took Captain Pike's advice and enlisted in Starfleet. Classic Kirk.
I got the part, I was very excited before I read the script that I was going to get a chance to, you know, bet all the women and kick some ass. And of course, I get my ass kicked the whole movie, and I don't really end up with anybody.
When it comes to alien assignations, comparing the new captain with the original just isn't fair. After all, Shatner had 79 TV episodes and 7 movies to hone his intergalactic pickup lines. Pine is still green, having little more than 2 hours to make his moves. And Pine's Kirk wasn't just lonely in love. He discovered it's lonely at the top as well, especially when no one's got your back.
He's going to be going through the trials by fire as the captain, where he has no room for error, and he bears all the responsibility when things go wrong.
Well, congratulations, Jim. Now we've got no captain and no first officer to replace him.
Yeah, we do.
What?
Pike made him first officer.
You gotta be kidding me.
Thanks for the support.
I don't know where he gets the strength to sit down in that chair, you know? I think a certain amount of his ability to settle into it is driven by ego, and then he finds out that it's got to be more than that.
The new Kirk is basically taking this sort of seat of his pants approach to command. I think he's just going to go with, my gut says do that.
So no matter what, he's going to go stop the bad guys. And I think in the end, that's part of the resolve that makes the crew love him. But he's going to put himself into every dangerous situation he can.
Chris Pine just nailed it and just really inhabited that character in a way I just didn't think anyone could ever pull off. And it's just a terrific reimagining.
The new Kirk is a totally unique animal. He's not like any of the captains we've seen before in that to be that young and with that much responsibility is going to lead this Kirk on a very different life path than the original Kirk.
Where will that path lead? Stay tuned for 2012, when a new chapter in the boy captain's adventures hits the big screen. Now it's time to dole out our Star Trek superlatives. For setting the gold standard for Starfleet Command, we give James Tiberius Kirk the award for most dashing. For sheer eloquence and intergalactic savoir-faire, we deem Jean-Luc Picard the most diplomatic. For his lethal stare and the ability to call a bluff at warp speed, we give Sisko the award for most direct. For her unflagging effort to bring the crew home despite the odds, we dub Janeway most determined captain. For pioneering the final frontier and ensuring the birth of the Federation, we give Jonathan Archer most driven. And for rebooting the adventure and bravely claiming the mantle of Kirkdom for a whole new generation, we call Kirk 2.0 Star Trek's most daring captain.
Every Star Trek series is defined by their captain.
Every captain they had, they found just the right person for that role.
We were all damn good. All. Yes. Very, very proud of the work. Terribly proud of the work, in fact.